There are a lot of stories about relationships forming. You have slice of life shows where the new kid ends up in a club and meets their best friends, to romances where a chance encounter spurs on a lifetime of love, and even action series tend to have arcs all about how the characters met and formed their camaraderie. There's something intoxicating in watching bonds form, a very human sort of high that boosts our mood unlike any other, maybe even setting our sights higher and encouraging us to form the same kinds of relationships. These stories are important because it's from our belief in the ability of connection to form that it is able to. If we go into interactions thinking, this could lead somewhere great, versus this will go nowhere, we'll have very different experiences, so I'm glad many stories stress this positive side of things.
But there is another side to that hill of connection that we just climbed, a natural slope back downwards. In a world where social media kind of prevents friendships from naturally ending as they used to, we don't see that slope as much, instead languishing in some odd space of we should catch up sometime forever. We changed from the hobbies we shared, we moved to different places, we get new jobs and our schedules greatly change, and from all that, the connections we once had will strain and break as life moves on. Sometimes what could have been the best thing in our life at that time, we just weren't in the right place for. Or we were right where we needed to be, but completely missed the time for it. And there's nothing to be done about this. It is just sad. So I think this is something equally important to explore and be prepared for: the tragedy of time and distance.
It's expressed quite perfectly in the movie 5 centimeters per second, with a title that is literally about time and distance. It starts with two childhood friends, Takaki and Akari, who transfer into the same class 1 year apart, leaving them a little bit behind socially. They also both suffer from bad allergies, and so while the rest of their class is outside playing, they tend to stay inside. And since they're inside and alone, it becomes a quite natural choice to go to the library, although they could have done other things as well. But both choosing to do so, they naturally run into each other, and as the two bookworm kids stuck inside, they begin to speak. This already starts to showcase the concept. Based on factors they didn't decide, transfer and allergies, they end up in the right place to be friends. And based on what they did decide to do with that time and place, to go to the library and further to say hello, they become great friends. Time and place created the perfect odds for them to become close, and that couldn't be changed. Say Akari, who transferred in later, got put in a different class based on class size or name letter or a different administrator, anything like that. Then the time would have been right, but the place less so, and so they couldn't have been as likely to be friends. What they were working with was what they had to, for better or worse. However, what leads it somewhere beneficial is still in part their will. They still had to say hello, have something they chose in common with enjoying reading. It's basically that life opens certain possibilities, and we take them to our benefit, which lessens the pain of this inherent restriction. By having these options pre-selected in a way, the uncertainty of total freedom is lost, and we have an easier time making the best of what's provided to us, like a curated list of recommendations. We don't have to put in all the effort in the world to connect like this, we just have to put in enough to say hello. And while all the ways we're limited are of course quite sad, there's an uplifting quality to knowing that usually, because of these similar restrictions, that's all we have to do is say hello.
However, this same principle is also what tears down those relationships. Just as life introduces convenience with time and place, it also takes it away with time and place. As Akari once transferred in, now she's transferred away, and that 5 centimeters that used to be between them in Tokyo becomes more like 100 kilometers between Tokyo and Lafune. This is just a fact. However they feel about each other and their connection, you can't suddenly change what distance means. 5 centimeters is always 5 centimeters, and 100 kilometers is always 100 kilometers. Even if you're in the right time, it might be the wrong place. Because suddenly their options are reduced. They send letters to each other because they want to, of course, but they also have to. It's the only option to communicate now. Before, they could see each other incidentally. You have to go to school, so in doing what you should or would do anyway, you see the people who are there. Or if you go to a movie with friends, for example, you see it together and then discuss it together. The whole process is both friendship and another activity all at once. These two don't have that anymore. All the time they devote to the other one has to come separate from chores and activities. It becomes an act of going out of one's way. This is why it takes 6 months for a letter to even be sent to begin with. With settling in, there was probably no time to separate off like that.
We also see this with how the reading and writing of the letters is presented. It's narration over top of daily activities, with him reading it during class under his other papers, or while eating dinner at home, or alone in a schoolroom after cleanup, and she has to write while on the train because she still lacks time to give up elsewhere. If they want to communicate with each other, time has to be lost elsewhere. What this equates to is basically time to cover distance. Because they are further, it requires more time to reach the same level of interaction. And this is something else quite literally shown as Takaki plans to visit Akari, leading to a not-so-simple trip. He has a detailed plan written out which he checks constantly with times and places and costs, one he made from nights of effort tracing maps and planning out such an exact time to get there across multiple line transfers, knowing it is going to take hours. What was once a walk across the classroom is now hours of travel. What their letters in this planning is showcasing is the importance of time and place. They make things easy. As we said, that limitation can be depressing, but it is also convenient. We can wholeheartedly make the best of what's before us because we don't have to work to acquire it in the first place. All the effort goes to deepening the relationship instead. It doesn't need maps and schedules. There's no planning. It's just there, and it's just good. The ease of it is a key factor because whether we like to think of it or not, all interactions are based on convenience to some degree. Whether that's the same coffee shop or the same server online, we can only speak with the people we have the time and energy and connection to do so with. And that doesn't make us bad people, it just makes us people to begin with. Although it is kind of sad. There's no way for us to make all the connections that we wish. We have to pick and choose where our love goes, and the more convenient it is, the more we can give.
There is something else that this distance adds though, more than just time to cover it, but chance. It's the very thing which brought them together. Every single extra kilometer that you add between two people is more opportunity for plans to go wrong, more time for those inconveniences to occur and get between them. This is exactly what happens when Takaki begins his hours-long commute to Akari. It starts after school when the rain is just picking up. Okay, that sucks, but no big deal really, just bring an umbrella. You got this. However, as the temperature is dropping, the rain turns to snow, and travel becomes terrible. Because he has so many line transfers, that is more complications with their own degrees of chance, they start to pile up in a terrible way, with each delay causing more delays after it. If the first train is 10 minutes late, then the next train has to wait that long too, and if that one's late, then it compounds again to the next one, and so on, forever. Each chance influences the next one until instead of getting there at 7, he's getting there at 11:15. Through no will of his own, and happening by things he couldn't change, he just ends up missing out on all that time.
And along the way, the altercations this produces create even more change. Not expecting to be this late, he didn't plan on needing to eat until he arrived, but being multiple hours behind, he needs something in his stomach. So he stops at a vending machine, reaching into his pocket, which he clearly didn't plan on because the letter he'd been working on for probably weeks is in there, and it falls out and is carried away by the wind. This could only happen because of all the time that was added on. More chances for things to go wrong. Had it been a shorter trip, it wouldn't have mattered. There'd be much less chance to compound. But each second is another where disaster could occur. This is stressing just how much inconvenience matters and why it's not a terrible thing for us to go on the side of convenience to combat it. Imagine if he did this all the time. How much would he be missing out on to get to this one person? Is it worth it? It's subjective, up to us to decide based on ourselves and our situations and so many factors, but it is a cold, hard fact at the center of it. Every 100 kilometers that we travel is many more 5 centimeters than we could have.
However, we stated earlier on that their will was key to it. They had to say hello for it to matter at all. And the same is true here. Even though this distance and time adds more potential for things to fail, it doesn't exclude a truly good outcome if they desire one. Because despite all the mishaps and delays, Takaki makes it there. And despite all the minutes passing where Akari could think, I should just go home, she didn't. Their respective wills to make something out of this situation still led to it being at least something of what they desire, and maybe even more. The night they share is exactly the kind of thing you expect from a movie like this, the kind of just realistic enough moments the screen implants into our very worldly desires. It's something I usually think of as sort of perfectly unideal. Everything goes wrong in just the right way to make something magic happen. Having pushed through so much mishap to get to each other, they're probably even more determined to make the most of the time that they do have.
They share a homemade meal in the station, and when it closes, they walk down and share their hearts, 2 trails of footprints making a temporary mark of their dedication. They spend a night together in an abandoned shack, talking the night away until exhaustion takes over. Because they desired it, because they put in effort to match, time and distance were conquered, and that can't be understated, that we hold some power, however small, in this grand scheme of chaos. None of this piling up of chance makes sense, and its power always hangs over us. But for small moments at a time, we rise above it. It's actually something else stressed in their meeting. They are aware of everything we've said to some degree. As Takaki thinks while they kiss,
the overwhelming weight of our lives to come, and the uncertainty of time, we would not be able to stay together.
But he ends that same train of thought on this.
All my fears began to melt away, leaving only Akari's soft lips on mine.
Yes, this relationship they have is doomed. There's no way for them to maintain something at this distance in the midst of a busy time in life, to be a kid trying to make the most of youth and with the looming threat of entrance exams that will take up much of their time. They'll start to think, I'll write a letter next week when things calm down, and then things never calm down until they forget to ever consider it again. In the end, time and place will win, as they do with everything. There will always be circumstances we can't help, whether it's our family deciding to move, or that we all have a moment where our time is up. Relationships are just a small corner of this larger principle, that futility is the default state, and that all connections, all things, are doomed to end. Imagine if the train couldn't complete the journey on that night because the weather got just even worse and it was impossible. This never would have happened, and he couldn't have done anything about it. Even though we have an input, there are certain things which simply can't be overcome, no matter how hard we try, and that's where all things end.
And yet, despite this, they forget for a moment. The success of the moment and what that brings outweighs the looming threats, with worries melting away for something much more important. They decided to be happy in spite of this inherent depression, and with each other's desires, it worked for a moment. Even if we can't change it, we still hold the power in what we do with this fact. So I don't think it's depressing that things will end, because it simply means that when we are presented with chances like the ones they had, or even harsh ones like the trip to get there, we have to take them. If life's going to make them all end, then it's up to us to push back, to try anyway, and to forget for moments at a time what is yet to come. Our determination can be rewarded in pockets of life's experience, even if the end is always the same. And I think that within our bounds, that is success. To try anyway, whether it's 5 centimeters or 100 kilometers, is our power.
But that comes with the acknowledgement of change. Sometimes that distance can grow even more, and sometimes that means that what we were fighting for stops being good for us. I mean, what's the point where we have to stop putting all of our eggs in one basket? This happens for the pair as Takaki moves this time, only a week after the meeting and even further away to the point that taking a trip stops making sense. 3 or 4 hours for a day basically makes it pointless, but for a weekend it's perfectly manageable. They could keep communicating and keep this connection alive despite the troubles because there was enough hope. Just as Chance had taken it away, they were still close enough that Chance could bring it back. But now, much further across the whole country, could that happen? Even if she moved back to Tokyo, he'd still be gone. Much more would have to line up for things to get back to where they once were. You could make the trips, but with essentially a day of travel, a weekend, which is all you have as kids in school, isn't even possible anymore. The whole time would be travel. And at the same time, they're becoming different people. Being in a different place changes who you are. At the most basic, this is what Takaki observes on the train when he says,
In what seemed like just the blink of an eye, the buildings that dotted the scenery became few and far between.
what they're seeing is different now, so what about what they're feeling? The people they're interacting with and what those people are feeling and the possibilities they have that are going to shape them.
Going to the same school is a crucial connection. You have so much in common right away without even trying. You can both hate that teacher or love the tree you see on the walk there. But when there's this much difference in where you live, you're going to grow a bit apart. You have to start explaining more details to get your stories across, listing more names they don't know and explaining those to make a point in all of those little details. You could almost describe it as saying that there are more chances to be misunderstood. It's as Akari says in her letter,
You probably wouldn't even recognize me. I bet you'll change little by little over time, too.
even if we desire to keep something from the past alive, the world is changing and so are we. Have we changed away from that thing we want to persist? Or has it changed away from us even? The way they change compounds the chances between them even more than we've already said. And so much so that it does stop being worthwhile, it seems.
We get specific shots of them each excitedly checking the mailbox to find a letter from the other and being very happy that there's one there. But then we also see them start to struggle to start writing, falling asleep after just addressing the letter. And even more, we see them start to check the mailboxes with a frown to see nothing in it, and then later walking past them only with a short glance and nothing more. The effort for the payoff starts to really show. And notably, it's because there are more convenient things in their life becoming more beneficial for them than a connection across so much distance and taking up so much time. The reason they find less time for each other is because of all the things changing for the better around them. As they walk past those mailboxes, they're walking with other people. One's right there who they can walk to school and talk with at once, something they can't do with each other. Someone who's only a 5-centimeter space away, not 100 kilometers. They find new activities and meet new people from them, find new directions in life to go, and can't have a respect for years-old connections with little hope. It's painful, but it's true. For them to find many more new and positive things in life, they might have to let go of this much more consuming good one from the past that gives little benefit. They have to see what's right in front of them and take advantage of it the exact way they met, rather than struggling against inconvenience so strongly. Things change and we do too. What was once our world, one day won't be. And to reject this, to miss what's in front of us, is a dangerous path that we see Takaki take. At his new school, he catches the attention of Kane, a girl who falls for him and how he's a bit different than the people she's seen before. Meeting at the transition into high school and being friendly all the way up through college selection, they've spent some time together. But Kane struggles to confess. Despite Takaki being constantly nice to her and willing to spend important moments together, she can't shake the feeling that
Toono's always looking past me. That's something far beyond.
And we see this pretty distinctly in how he's designed for this section of the story. Wherever or whenever they are, he has a distinctive cold stare, his eyes without much color, as if he's not really observing what's in front of him, but thinking somewhere else, very unfocused and distant. His memories have grown a bit hazy, so he's not exactly thinking of writing to Akari anymore, but instead he's thinking about a recurring dream where he's standing with a girl on some distant planet, observing an impossible scene of beauty together. He consistently writes notes about this to no one, drafting emails about it just to delete them. It's a holdover of the letters he used to write clearly, although he forgets even this, as he thinks about the process.
When did I get in the habit of writing messages to nobody?
Considering that his dream is this picturesque scene, it seems like he's waiting for a miracle, for when the perfect place is reached at the perfect time. Instead of focusing on what could be made with what's in front of him, he thinks back on some even more idealized and impossible vision of the moment that he did share with Akari. From that, he knows quite adeptly that time and place can't be bent to his will, and that is healthy. He remarks to Kane when she says how put together he seems in comparison to her that,
I'm sort of lost all the time. I just do what I can. That's all I can do.
and I think that is quite positive, not just to dispel the idea that anyone truly knows what they're doing, but saying that all he's doing is what he can. That's all we can expect ourselves to do after all. We can't make time and place ours, we can only work with what they provide us. But this can lead to a side effect that I think we should also note. He waits and nothing more. Since he can't make these facts of the world work for himself to find something perfect, he just lets them happen until they might line up in an ideal way. Why go for something now when something next year could be a whole lot better?
His nature is expressed in the hobby he picks up at this school, archery, a sport with a goal of repeatability. To be perfect is to hit the target in the same place, through the same stance and the same motion each time. You want to perfect all of those things and repeat. It's not about something new, but holding on to and crafting what's old. This is what his mind is built for. So she's right. He does look past her, waiting for a future that plays so many odds at once it's almost impossible. The feat of having such a perfectly unideal night spoiled his mindset as he waits for the next one. So I think Kane is right to not act on her feelings and even to say,
I'm begging you, please, don't be so nice to me.
because she worked real hard to play the odds for the right place. She studied and studied to get into the same high school, and then every single day she worked her schedule to end up in the same place as him and get time together. She's done everything in her power with the place they've been provided, making the most of the odds she can't help and taking control of the ones she could, and he's not doing anything to make it the right time for anyone. He looks off in the distance for a time yet to come. This is the negative thing about having some power, however slight of a chance. Because it requires our input, we can just as easily choose to do nothing. We can sit around and wait for a dream.
The story doubles down on this by having his quote about only doing what he can actually play out much better for her mindset than for his, showing that what we decide to do with those words is of course key. It actually inspires her to finally achieve her own hobby of surfing, one in great contrast to his. Instead of being about dry repeatability, it's about using your training to capture a specific moment. You still have to have a practiced form and technique, but you apply it to a pattern of waves that you can in no way predict. You have to make the best of the conditions of the ocean, just like she's trying to make the best of their moments together, all unpredictability and everything. For her, just doing what you can is recognizing that you won't ever have the ideal conditions, the right place at the right time, but that means all you have to do is your best. If you get a crappy wave, you get a crap wave. There will be more, so get up and try again with the next one. It's all you can do. It's something she had to do for 6 months to finally get that hobby right.
Now, this doesn't change the pain of these facts. Seeing all the work you did with the place you're in, only to have to realize that the time isn't right and let it all be for nothing, is good in the end because you can move on and make better of what comes next. But it doesn't change that it sucks. It really sucks to look at everything you did, every emotion you put behind every action, and recognize that from no fault of your own, it didn't lead anywhere. That you got up to try with each wave, but the waves didn't try for you. That time and place still rules us in the end. And there's nothing amazing, no hopeful twist on crying oneself to sleep that makes it fine and dandy. It's a horrible time, plain and simple. It will happen to everyone, and it sucks. The only solace is that because of those tears, that pain which pushes on to something new, we will be better in the end. A time where looking to the future for just a moment might be helpful to know what will come next. And then, when it does show up, to get on that board and hope the wave doesn't crash down on you. All we can do is what we can. Where Kane shows the potential to move on, Takaki never does. That stare he always had stays into his adult years where, fed up with his job and life overall after a few years of working, he quits and starts living as basically a shut-in. He breaks up with his girlfriend of 3 years through silence alone, who says to him,
She wrote, "We must have exchanged emails 1,000 times, but I doubt our hearts got closer by even a centimeter."
It's a short and sweet confirmation that the boy we saw never learned his lesson. It's probably even worse because of his desires for another moment like his dream. Life with all its duties and responsibilities was nothing like that he was holding out for. What to him was an effort in waiting was entirely unpaid, all wasted effort to no reward. That pain that Kane expressed but moved on from, it's become everything for him. As he says,
"In just living my life, it's as though sadness piles up all around me."
he's entirely focused on that aspect, the pain which comes inherent to these factors we can't help and makes it his being. He waited for years and years, looking ahead for that perfect moment where things lined up, and then they just never did. And so he got fed up and quit, and now he can't even think about putting his own will into time and place to make something happen like he did as a kid. As far as he's aware, looking ahead for so long, it never matters.
But we see in his surroundings that, although the decisions are of course weighted, choice is important. He's made the decision to let that sadness build up, shown in his apartment. The piles of trash that he kicks over to get to a phone he doesn't answer, sitting around instead of being taken out, is a choice. Millions of people in that city take those bags out every week because they can and decided to. He can, but has chosen not to. Not to take them out, not to answer the phone, not to do anything. He'd rather they stay right there so he can feel as he does forever. To give in to the factors we can't change and admit defeat. The hope for something perfect has actually destroyed him. This idealized image that one is entirely beholden to conditions made him a moody, edgy young adult walking the city depressed in the outfit of a mid-2000s sign-in protagonist, believing the worst because he refused to even try to make the best. He is right that sadness piles up. Time and place are tragic factors. But the answer then is to keep moving, to be in a new place at a new time where those piles aren't anymore. If you fight change and stay right there, they'll grow higher and overwhelm you. But if you keep moving so new piles start in new places, that won't happen. To keep moving is the answer and almost a necessity, so that you can keep seeing past all that sadness.
And this is exactly what Akari has done. We don't witness her life in the second stage of the story, but she re-enters here, once again in Tokyo to visit family, before returning home to prepare for a wedding. Her wedding. We see a ring on her finger and quick flashes of her embracing her husband, little glimpses of happiness that she's found in the time we haven't seen her. While here though, she does think about that old happiness as well. It seems she recently found the box full of the old letters they used to write, and with hints of both gratitude and sadness, she remembers that night they shared, staring out the window of the train, a moment we've all probably experienced. We know that it's a mixed feeling. It was what once meant the world to her. It's not something to be forgotten. But where she found it is where it should be. A box, lost somewhere in the house. It's there to be discovered, to be remembered as a part of your life still, but in the background, only seen here and there. Unlike the trash surrounding Takaki, Akari keeps moving and prevents a pileup, keeping only what she has to remember fondly. The things which led her to be this better person today.
And so when they pass by each other by chance at the very railroad crossing where they promised to watch the cherry blossoms fall again all those years ago, and the train separates them for just a moment, Takaki thinks,
I felt it strongly. That if I turned around at that moment, she'd have turned to look at me too.
But then she doesn't. When the train is gone, she is too. Because she moved on and he didn't. There's no reason to sit by and wait for something that wouldn't even really benefit her life. Sure, catching up would be nice, but she's able to have a full life exactly because she hasn't been hanging on enough to remember. And it would only be reminiscing, as she would have to get back to the things that are currently convenient and beneficial for her. Not one from the past with someone she has completely changed from. What he knows of her isn't even who she is anymore. But they even like who the other is as such different people. He waited for the right place and the right time, all those extreme odds to line up, and you know what? After all those years, they did. Like every movie where the impossible happens and two people reconnect, meeting again in the spot they promised, the exact right place at the exact right time.
But our will is stressed once again. It wasn't that way for her. Just like he looked past Kane, she looks past this moment, making it the right place, but the wrong time through her decision to. There's just enough subjectivity for us to decide what's right and what's wrong, to make the best of what we see in the way we see. And sometimes to see it be wrong is the best thing for us, to let us move on and make the best of 5 centimeters instead of forcing 100 kilometers. Takaki actually smiles when the train passes and there's no one there. And in a way, I think this is because he's free now. The past has actually left him behind, proving that even if he held out for the perfect time and place, it wouldn't be so. He has to pick up his own perfect time and place, embrace that subjectivity and his will as he did all those years ago, turning allergies and loneliness into that amazing connection. As it always has been, it's up to him to make the best of the tragedy that is time and place. This is one where you don't really go into it planning, like I'm gonna write a personal story for the end of this. I really didn't here because I liked the shorter length and how it ended right there. But it's one of those things where once you actually get into it, you just see that it does really well with one of those stories because it's something that everyone knows, a feeling that everyone's had in one way or another. Even me, the formerly super awkward and very lonely kid with not many friends in high school. I had a few here and there that persisted from moments earlier in life with less inhibition, but as senior year loomed, it became clear we'd be going in different directions, and I was already kind of emotionally distanced from them anyway, before college would even split us apart further, and I'd be starting over. I went to a university that wasn't very far from my high school though, so some people I'd at least seen before ended up in the same place, and even more in some of the same classes because same major. I didn't know them very well. It was more of a you know the people I know situation, but we'd spoken to some degree. It was just enough that a few weeks into classes, when I walked past the game room and saw them in there with a bunch of other people playing Smash Bros, a game I loved at the time, I was comfortable enough to go in and try to play too. I forgot exactly how I went in or what I said. It was probably walking and cracking some joke at the expense of the people I knew to try and impress new ones. I can't remember exactly what I did, I just know I did. And I was probably the weird outsider to the ones I knew, but someone with a clean slate to the people I didn't. Over the course of the next few months, that game room became the nerd haven of that small, crappy branch campus. We fumbled our way through games of pool together, took turns downloading pizza apps for the first time discounts, and monopolized the TV with a Wii U and 8 controllers. I got to know the couple who had been together since their high school days, literally around the corner, the kid who used to mess with me in high school but remembered us as friends somehow, the other Yu-Gi-Oh player there who had much better decks than me, and the one with more fun cards and a Dragon Ball Z backpack I made myself compliment one day before we knew each other after 5 minutes of internal monologuing to prepare myself to. It's not like we were the kind of people to go out to parties or anything like that, so our stories are relatively quite tame. There are no grand adventures, there are no intense fights. There's really little more than standing around in someone's house playing video games or drinking and talking while standing in the kitchen, which is a time-honored tradition as far as I'm concerned. But that's really all we needed. To have somewhere to go when work was out and we wanted to relax, to have someone who would ask you how you're doing and you say fine, but then after a few drinks you remember it's not fine and you actually talk about it a bit. People you take a free trip to a city 8 hours away with, and before one of them has to leave early, you decide to drunkenly put peanut butter in his sandals and he somehow doesn't realize for months. People who you'll drive an hour for every single weekend, whatever state the world is in, to keep yourself fine, buying bottom shelf alcohol with whatever money you could muster to be a good guest. And it's to the point where now you honestly kind of like how terrible those things tasted. People to play the hot trending game on a Discord call with when the world shuts down because you can't spend your weekends together chasing a team of every legendary on Pokemon Go anymore. People to finally be a person with after years of not really doing so. These are all just one-sentence snippets of much broader moments, full of faces and expressions I couldn't communicate to you because I don't remember them in more than the emotions. The overwhelming joy of winning a lawn game by one single point, the regret when you spill a drink on someone's favorite board game, or the wish that times like these would never end. It's a whole host of memories across many years which bleed into each other, leaving in its wake a subtle and gentle happiness. It's a time in my life I'd like to think I could never forget, which inexplicably shaped who I am as a person because I walked past a certain door at a certain time. I could have gone any number of directions on that day or the ones that followed. If I thought to myself that the other door right there was faster to get to my car, or that I'd rather walk outside, or that there were too many people down that hallway instead, I never would have seen that space and entered it. If my horrible partner had decided to ruin my life just a few weeks earlier, or if I had a test to study for stealing my concentration, I wouldn't have been in the right headspace to interact in that space. There were so many seemingly unrelated but inexplicably linked factors which created the time and place this moment was for me and all those others, and there was very little control I had in any of that. I never thought college was a choice. I never considered going anywhere else. I had to take those classes at those times. They literally made me the last to schedule, so I didn't have a single choice. But I did have a choice and a will to say hello. Now, I hated that school. I hated my classes, and I hated what they were teaching me, and I hated the hour-long drive because my stupid parents moved further away, and I hated that bridge I drove over that made me have horrible thoughts each time, and I hated most of my life. But this room, these people, these feelings, they were the best I could make of all of that. And they were the best that I needed. I can never forget this specific night where for some stupid reason I was so depressed and alone in this side room of the campus with all these computers in it that no one ever used. And without missing a beat, one of my friends came to the room and we started playing crappy flash games on a school computer like it was high school library break all over again, literally for hours until campus police came to tell us to get out because they had to lock up. What should have been a terrible night in my life is now a great one where I can't even remember why I was sad because it mattered so little after him showing up and accidentally fixing it. He didn't even know what I was going through or how much it meant. That's just the kind of thing we did, making the best of that shitty computer in that shitty room. I could go on for probably literally hours just listing moments like this that stick out in my mind, things that I hope will be with me forever. But the sad reality of it is that they can't, and so deeply right now, I know that they aren't. Most of those memories started almost 10 years ago now. It was a time and place we all shared known as college, with the same professors and classes to bitch about, the same spaces to share, and the same reasons for what we did. We had to be there, and that obligation is what allowed us to break past the barriers between people. But we were kids seeking to understand ourselves, the world, and our place within it, a factor which never really stops. You just start to be an adult looking for the same thing. We were changing then, and we're changing now, but now we're doing it without that same place. We've moved closer to some and further apart from others. We're doing it without the same time, as the schedules of cashiers, semi-professional gamblers, half YouTubers, and managers start to conflict a lot. Doing it without the same reasons, as some of us dig deeper into changing ourselves, understanding our needs and wants and finding safety in our skin, while others change their lives forever with children, binding themselves to an obligation of life, of time and place for the foreseeable future. Our fulfillment was once playing games together in a room, and now it just isn't anymore. The convenience of each other has dropped, and the loss of time and place, and it drifts us further apart. I've started swiping away those Discord notifications instead of leaving them in my list. I've stopped wanting to push them to do all the kinds of things I can enjoy, just as they don't ask me for the ones they now do. I've met new people, ones who understand my direction in life because they lived it before. People who've spent wild nights out that proved some little piece of their identity which was locked away for so long, so true, and acted on it, and something within me, deep within me, started to scream for that, seeing it and wanting it and reaching out to chase those experiences they had with them as guides, to understand myself so late into the game. And I speak these words with a fervor that won't stop, and sometimes with chills down my spine, because it's what I feel in my entirety, that these nights, this understanding, this task of exhausting the possibilities of myself, of wondering, who am I? I know people who understand this and me from that. And those people aren't the friends I made some 10 years ago who are now having kids. Because that's an act of more sure identity, of staking a place and a claim to who one is and settling down within that understanding. I can't understand it, just as they can't understand why I want to be rubbing shoulders with half-naked strangers in an abandoned lot to terribly repetitive music. Even with a few drinks, I can't find that understanding between those two worlds anymore. Where there were once words between our issues, there are now just nods and stares. I never thought about making some active choice to drift away from these people, like I had to distance myself from them for my health or anything like that, like what I kind of did in high school. In fact, it was the opposite. I saw movies where old college friends fell apart from each other, but I always think to myself, well, yeah, but not us. And then the screen started to come to life. It got so difficult to try and budge them to have the kinds of nights I wanted, just the same as they felt with me and their nights. Our efforts started to grow and grow for less and less, our time taken up elsewhere and our places so much further apart. Even if hints remain, I'm not the person who was able to make friends with them anymore, and they're not the people I became friends with anymore either. And it is sad. It is terribly sad. I sit here in part writing about these memories because I know that one day they will all fade into the background of my mind as we find ourselves further and further apart. To know that what was once all I wanted in life, anything I wanted to do with my weekends, is gone, and I'm left to find something new as someone new. To know that camaraderie and companionship, the hallmarks of how we fend off the inevitable depression of all things, are deep down matters of convenience, and that we have to somewhat understand people in such a utilitarian way. To know that all right times and all right places, all right things inevitably become wrong and end. It makes me terrified for what I have right now. When will these connections end just the same? When it's 4 missed weeks of card games in a row and everyone is starting to hate the game, will we all drift apart without that hobby? Will I be telling stories of these people with twinges of sadness, knowing I haven't seen them in months or in years? As breakups drive new friend groups apart and it feels like the people I build a bond with are gone in just a few weeks, will this be the state of things forever, drifting between the other lost souls to no avail? The person that I love right now and the house we imagined together, will those dreams come crashing down one day? Will I hate what I once loved? Will everything, every emotion at every time and in every place be for nothing? It's a paralyzing fear, and for many years it led me to do nothing. All things end, all things are pointless, and life is a zero-sum game. Whatever I do or don't do, time and place will limit me and rob me of all I have ever known. Even if I express this to someone and say we should do everything we can to prevent it, things will change, we will change, and our will to do so may be lost. But this is exactly why I write about these memories and why I try to make new ones. Because if I'm going to lose all of it anyway, if life is a series of vain endeavors and all things are doomed, if time and place seeks to make me nothing more than a puppet, then I'll abuse those factors for myself. All those events I go to, these lots and those bars, they're full of people bound together in that exact same condition. They too are prisoners of time and place, beholden to terrible restrictions which drive them to understand an unfairly limited self. But this provides the fault for us to use. If we are always all bound by time and place, then we are always all connected over something, and we always have someone to connect to. Between all people, there is this terrible string woven of limitations. From the very reason that it all ends, we find the beginning of it just the same. These are our conditions, our factors which can't be changed that we share. We have to accept that fact. But then, as we should with all things, we have to ask, what now? How do we apply our will to make something of it? What will you do in that place you can't change? And what will you do with that time that you found? And with enough will, how can you make them change into the right place at the right time?
And that will wrap things up for this one. I know these outros aren't really needed, but it's like a good cool down between the very serious ending of these videos, even if it's hopeful and like just going back to like work or laundry or whatever you're probably doing right now. This one, obviously, you can tell looked a little bit different. I'm trying to work on the presentation side of things because I've been focused on like, oh, I have to write better for so long that I didn't realize that I'd never thought about how I speak or how it all looked once I got the setup started. So I wanted to try and mix that up a bit, make it more visually interesting, try to kind of make myself a better presenter for a few reasons. But so I appreciate some people who left comments on that, like just some kind of random feedback of like, hey, you know, like the way you speak could be better. That's not exactly what it was, or you know, about maybe like the presentation on the AI video and how that was kind of cool. So I should incorporate some elements of that into this and different things. But yeah, so let me know what you thought of it. If you think it improves the video, I'll try to work on making sure the audio sounds the same because it might be different between the two mics that I used. But other than that, like, do you think it adds to the video visually? Do you think it's something I should do? Do you think like one outfit, multiple angles is good? I think that's kind of what I see mostly from other people. Yeah, it didn't add too much setup time, so it should be fine. Anyway, I think that's most of what I have for this one. Is I'd really appreciate feedback on the presentation stuff because I don't know, it's just that thing of like when you're looking at like, oh, this is something that I want to do long-term professionally with my life. You kind of start to get into the swing of like, I need to improve all aspects of this, not just like one aspect of it that I think might be good for the future. So I'm working on that. Anyway, important links in the pinned comment to Discord, but most notably Patreon, where I think that's another thing I want to improve. I'm gonna try to start doing monthly Q&As for supporters there. I'll never like gate content or anything like that. It's just going to be small little bonus things. But that helps me keep doing this. So big thank you to those people. I'll let you know when I get some more benefits going on there. And to everyone for your time here today, thank you for watching. I hope I'll see you again soon.